Alright, so we got the 227 spoilers, and the battle between GOJO and Sukuna is continuing, because in the previous chapter we saw that GOJO was pretty much stuck inside of Sukuna's barrier. And let me also quickly apologize, because for the last, I guess, couple weeks, I was incorrectly saying that the radius of Sukuna's barrier was nearly 200 kilometers, when it was actually meters. And to be honest, guys, I thought I was saying meters, but I was saying kilometers because I have like a chimp brain, and I just couldn't make my brain work properly because, you know, I have limited capacity with that stuff. Also, I'm American and I only really understand cheeseburger by bald eagles. So again, I am sorry to anyone who I offended by saying kilometers instead of meters. I will try my hardest to not make that mistake again. I am sorry, guys. It is nearly 200 meters and not kilometers. But anyway, GOJO was continuously using reverse curse technique to heal from all of the slashes until suddenly he just stopped doing it, and we saw him grab onto Sukuna and blasted him in the face with red, because it turned out that GOJO was actually healing his curse technique instead of his own flesh, because his curse technique of course was burned out from using his domain previously. And the chapter ended with Sukuna's face just being a bloody mess after taking that red blast. And that brings us to this chapter that starts with Kusakabe not understanding the mechanism behind healing the burnt out curse technique through reverse curse technique, and Yuta says that it's not impossible since GOJO just showed it, but usually it's like an engine getting overheated. One has to wait until it's cooled down to reuse. Hearing what Yuta said, Maki says that reverse curse technique can fix but can't cool down, right? And Yuta says that that's what he thought until now, but his understanding was not enough. But Yuta starts to worry that GOJO might be doing something really overwhelming right now. So yeah, GOJO is for sure doing something very overwhelming, and we're going to see later on in this chapter that he is doing something extremely overwhelming, burning through so much cursed energy. But also, as we suspected, Sukuna like just instantly healed, you know, using reverse curse technique, of course, from that blast to the face. So yeah, just coming off of these chapters, nothing is really phasing these guys. The scene switches to Sukuna and GOJO, and Sukuna once again uses Malevolent Shrine to expand to its full extent, which is nearly 200 meters. And GOJO too opens his domain again, while Kusakabe shouts at GOJO, "Are you stupid? What are you thinking?" Ino wonders if GOJO is trying to repeat the same thing again, but Shoko rebukes him, saying that GOJO isn't such a softie. And Higuruma notices that GOJO has switched the conditions of the inside and outside of the domain. But first, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, Beam. Guys, have you had trouble sleeping in the past, or are you having trouble sleeping right now? I'm sure you're dealing with this to some extent. I mean, I know that I am. Whether it's late nights working, stress, or anxiety, and I can't stress enough how important getting good sleep is. I'm sure you've noticed how you feel like 50% or even less of yourself after having like a poor night's sleep. But that's where Beam's Dream Powder comes in, because it contains ingredients such as L-theanine, magnesium, melatonin, nano CBD, and reishi to help you fall asleep and stay asleep. The Dream Powder comes in different flavors and potencies, so you can customize it for your lifestyle. It tastes pretty much like a delicious nighttime hot chocolate, and there's no added sugar, and it's only 15 calories, and you can take it 30 minutes before bedtime. And guys, the Dream Powder works, I can assure you of that. And it's definitely going to give you that proper sleep, which give you benefits such as like increased focus, improved memory, boosted energy, reduced stress, improved mood. So check out the link in the description, and make sure you use my code Zhoniin to get 35% off your first order when you subscribe, and then 20% off all of the following orders. Plus, when you subscribe to Dream Powder, you'll receive a frother with your first order. You could pause, skip, or cancel anytime, so there's no risk. Again, guys, that's code Zhoniin. Thanks. Meaning that GOJO's barrier is now strong against the attacks from outside. Kusakabe whines, wondering how GOJO can switch up the conditions on the domain so easily. So yeah, this is smart by GOJO, but also just further showing how these guys just kind of operate outside of everyone else, especially within just Jujutsu and the rules that Gege kind of set. Like, they can essentially just do whatever they want. Because we saw before that since Sukuna's domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, was an open domain, domain and didn't have a closed barrier the way that GOJO's does, just contains itself inside of a sphere. GOJO's domain kind of just sat on top of a flat plane, which is what Sukuna's barrier essentially was, meaning that it was vulnerable to attacks from the outside, and that's how GOJO's domain was originally defeated. It was attacked by the slashing attacks, and it broke because domains are vulnerable to attacks from the outside. But now that GOJO's experienced that, he's reinforced the barrier from the outside so he won't fall victim to that again. Sukuna's punches start to land on GOJO, and this is because Sukuna can use domain amplification simultaneously while using domain expansion. So yeah, once again, these guys are just doing whatever they want, playing outside of what anybody thought anyone was capable of, like doing crazy things such as domain amplification while using a domain expansion. But GOJO's like, who cares? But then he realizes that Sukuna's must-hit effect from the shrine also seems to turn off. And that kind of makes sense at first, because we know that using domain amplification prevents you from using your innate technique, but there's actually more to it, because Kenjaku's back, and he explains that the people who don't get affected by GOJO's infinite void are GOJO himself and the person he's touching. Sukuna kept in touch with GOJO to survive the void and got rid of his must-hit effect inside the domain to enhance attack power outside of GOJO's domain. So this is wild. That is like one of the flaws to GOJO's infinite void, as we know, because he did this with Yuji back when he did it against Jogo, and I guess this is how Sukuna was possibly made aware of this. He was just watching from inside of Yuji possibly. But since he is making contact with GOJO, they're actually back to back in this sequence, similar to how GOJO was back to back with Sukuna in the very first episode. This could be paralleling to that possibly, but he's unaffected by infinite void, because if he were to get hit by it, then I guess he would have been defeated instantly, the same way that Jogo was, just his brain overloaded with infinite information essentially. But now that he's also shut down his attacks from inside of the domain, he's amplifying them to the outside so that it can once again break GOJO's domain itself, just as he did before. And due to all that, GOJO once again loses the domain battle against Sukuna, and Yuji wonders why, and Kusakabe realizes that Sukuna might also have changed the conditions of the domain like GOJO, and Kashimo comes forward and says that if GOJO dies, he's really gonna go out and fight Sukuna. So this is really interesting. Now, I'm not saying this is another death flag for GOJO, but it possibly could be. But I guess Kashimo's whole big defining character trait is that he has a big obsession with fighting Sukuna. I mean, that's the number one reason why he is in the Culling game in the first place, why he made a deal with Kenjaku 400 years ago to be reincarnated. And he also says that he has a curse technique that he can only use once. And it could also tie back into Hindu mythology, and I'm paraphrasing severely with this, but there's essentially a character that can use a single attack, which I think could be lightning based, similar to how Kashimo's is implied to be, and it's said to be able to kill gods. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna for sure see Kashimo use this against Sukuna. So that means that either GOJO is going to lose or Kashimo is just going to step in prematurely and use it. But we're gonna see him do that against Sukuna, and I think it's gonna mess him up for sure. I mean, it's been built up since his fight against Sakari. But anyway, to everyone's surprise, Sukuna cuts aren't too deep onto GOJO, and Kusakabe tells everyone that it's due to falling blossom emotion, a secret anti-domain technique passed down in the big three families. GOJO tells Sukuna that he had learned it when he was a kid but hadn't used it so far. So this is wild, and to be honest, I should have thought about this sooner, because we did see this previously in the series, of course. This was used by Naobito, Naoya's father, when he was inside of Dagon's domain. It was also used by Ogi when he was fighting Maki, but it's different from simple domain, where they manifest their own domain to nullify a domain expansion's auto hit, because falling blossom motion shrouds the user in an armor of cursed energy that counterattacks the moment a domain's guaranteed hit makes contact. So in this instance, GOJO is using that to fight against Sukuna's auto hit slashing abilities, but it's still crazy that he's able to do this after 2 failed domain expansions. But speaking of that, Gojo somehow once again uses his domain, but this time he expands it very large. Kashimo says that Gojo's doing it to cover Sukuna's range. Higuruma says, although it won't be destroyed from the outside, it's useless if he loses inside. So yeah, somehow Gojo is expanding his closed barrier, you know, the black sphere that we see from our perspective. But instead of it just being the standard size and sitting inside of Sukuna's radius as it has before, he's made it somehow so big that it is encompassing all of Sukuna's domain and all of its radius. So this way it can't be attacked from the outside the way that it was before. But contrary to everyone's expectations, Gojo shrinks his domain range to the size of a little ball. What happened to Gojo and Sukuna inside the domain? Find out next week. So yeah, that's where the chapter ends, and it looks like Gojo has, I don't know, contained Sukuna and himself inside of this domain, which from this perspective looks like it's the size of a basketball now. So I guess he's just compressed the space around them. So I don't think they're dead or anything, but he's just warping, like I said, the space, more so that I guess the reality of things are warped inside of this. And yeah, that's where the chapter ends. And I'd like to go more into this in the chapter review that's going to be coming out later this week. So look out for that, guys. And let me know what you think about this in the comments. What's going on with this warped, compressed space domain strategy that's Gojo is using against Sukuna? And if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.